What's going on, everybody? Welcome into episode 41 of the MudWatch Sports Podcast on this Friday, January 17th, 2024. I'm your host, Zach Malamuth. Before we get started, please subscribe below. Follow all of my social accounts. Let's start things off in the NBA as the New York Knicks are in action tonight, taking on the Minnesota Timberwolves. 7:30 start tonight as the Timberwolves are 21-19 on the year. Knicks sitting in third place in the Eastern Conference, 27-15 record. A 7:30 start where the Knicks come in as 4.5-point favorites, and the total sitting at 218.5. Big stories for tonight. Karl-Anthony Towns, a game-time decision taking on his former team, and we'll see what happens as he has that bone chip in his thumb. So they're still figuring that out, but is it going to be long enough there or hurtful enough to him that he's not going to play? Probably going to be in there, I would think. Obviously, the motivation of playing his former team, but you never know. Knicks could play it safe here as they are at home tonight. I mentioned the 4.5-point favorites. That's also Minnesota without Dante DiVincenzo, obviously a guy that comes off the bench for them. He's going to be out for tonight's game. And when you look at this game overall, it should be a comfortable day for the New York Knicks, but they haven't found things too easy in the last couple of weeks, and just 3 wins now in their last 8 games, and obviously those 5 losses. I talked about it on the last episode. Go check that one out on YouTube. But when you look at the Knicks right now, I just feel like they need some more depth and some guys behind the OG Anunobys and the Mikal Bridges of the world. So if they get another guy behind those two, I feel like that could be very helpful for them, especially down the stretch and later in the season. But right now, the Knicks sit at 27-15, so they're not in any sort of panic type of mode. And obviously, they got the win the other night, the win in overtime in Philadelphia, and Philly kept it close. They were without Joel Embiid. Thought he was going to play, but then he got ruled out, and ultimately a guy that's going to be out for most likely a couple weeks now in Joel Embiid. So more damage for this Sixers team as they lost 125-119 in overtime as Brunson scores 16 of his 38 in the fourth quarter and overtime. Really needed to carry in this one, especially without Cat and Josh Hart. The contribution from him was absolutely tremendous. His 4th triple-double of the season, and got 10 points along with 17 rebounds, 12 assists, and just a really strong outing from Josh Hart to really carry that big man type of load without Karl-Anthony Towns. They had Jericho Sims, they had Precious Achiuwa, both getting minutes here, but I mean, it was Josh Hart and Jalen Brunson who really were the story in this one. Mikal Bridges as well, hitting 5 threes against Philadelphia. But looking towards tonight, and like I said, I feel like the Knicks should win this one and really win things comfortably against Minnesota, who's been middle of the pack. But you never know with this Knicks team, and Anthony Edwards on any given day could really be a strong player for Minnesota and really just erupt at Madison Square Garden. So we'll see what happens. But the Knicks take on the Timberwolves. 7:30 start tonight. It's the 21-19 Minnesota Timberwolves, the 27-15 New York Knicks. 7:30 start as the Knicks are 4.5-point favorites at MSG. Shifting things to baseball, as all the noise coming out of Citi Field in the last 24 hours, Pete Alonso unlikely to return to the New York Mets, as both sides really not on the same page when it came to a contract, and it seems unlikely that Alonso returns to Citi Field. Looks like he's going to try and go elsewhere and really get that money that he feels that he deserves. I don't think he's going to get that money that he expects from a couple years ago. Obviously offered that contract extension by the Mets a couple years ago. Doesn't take it. Looks to prove his value and his worth in the last couple of seasons. Obviously there was a drop as well in Alonso's production in the last couple of seasons, so that doesn't help his cause. And ultimately, they're not going to really agree to a deal, it looks like, and some other options that he's looking at. Blue Jays among the teams that have been talking to Alonso's camp. Maybe the Angels, another team that's involved. And I think when you look at the Mets overall, it's a real heartbreaker there in my mind for the New York Mets, because this is a team that signed Juan Soto, and they're looking for a championship this year. They're looking for a championship almost every year now, with Juan Soto being the star man in their lineup. They don't have a power hitter behind Juan Soto. I mean, they have Francisco Lindor, and you could say, yeah, that 1-2 tandem at 1-2 is good, but I don't think it really takes them to the next level when you're talking about a power hitter right behind them that could be a Pete Alonso. Yes, Mark Vientos had a great season last year and a great postseason in the end, but he's not the power hitter that Pete Alonso is. When you look at the Mets, that's what they're lacking now, and that's something that they're going to have to look at. I mean, we're talking way back in the offseason, guys like Christian Walker, Carlos Santana, even Paul Goldschmidt, just on the radar, and guys that you could give a one-year deal, and the Mets really just held out on that. They thought they were going to get a deal with Pete Alonso. I think it's just disappointing in the end overall. It's not done, but it's looking super, super unlikely that Pete Alonso returns to the New York Mets. So in the end, a lot of Mets fans already have their eyes set on Vlad Guerrero Jr. for next season. The problem with that is it's still a year away. So much can happen in the next 12 months to screw up the Mets plans, or Mets fans' hypothetical plans, to get Vladimir Guerrero. He can sign a new contract extension. What if the Blue Jays are really good this year? What if they go on a run and all of a sudden he wants to stay in Toronto? What if all of a sudden there's another team involved that trades for Vladimir Guerrero, gives the Blue Jays the prospects that they want and are asking for, those high-level guys, and all of a sudden Vladimir Guerrero is gone, and maybe, yes, they get him when it comes to the contract and the money in the offseason, but what if he signs an extension somewhere? I don't think that this is as easy as Met fans are really planning out. Yes, Pete Alonso is a huge loss for them, and I think it's even bigger from the point that they don't have a first baseman that can really play that Pete Alonso type of role. Can they bite the bullet for a year and then go out and get a guy like Vlad Guerrero? Sure they can, and Steve Cohen obviously has proven all the money that he has. But right now, this Mets team is not even close enough to winning a championship with no Pete Alonso type of player behind Juan Soto and Francisco Lindor. Their starting pitching, their relief pitching, all needs work. They really need to continue to grab guys and continue to roll in this offseason. It seems like they've taken a bit of a pause since the Alonso stories have come out. But right now, they don't have Pete Alonso. They're probably not going to have Pete Alonso. And that's going to be a massive loss for the New York Mets. I expect this season something that they're going to have to really think about, and think about really any guy that they could go after right now to replace what Pete Alonso's production is. I don't think there's too many guys out there that can do that at first base. So we'll see what happens. But, I mean, this is a very disappointing day in my mind for the New York Mets, for the New York Mets faithful, a guy that they really thought could be the next David Wright in terms of just the face of the franchise and ready to roll. Once they get Juan Soto, though, it seems that the Mets have changed their thoughts on a guy like Pete Alonso. That's just how it is in the world of baseball, and it's a business overall. But in the end, I just think Pete Alonso maybe deserved a little bit better, and a guy that really has given his all to this franchise the last couple of years. And the production's been very high. And yes, there's been the down parts of the season for him, but a guy who really looked like he was going to be a Met for life, and it's all gone downhill in this last couple of months. So that's a very interesting story for the New York Mets, and something they're going to have to think about. And obviously, this could be a 12-month type of story as the Mets look to plan to really replace Pete Alonso and look for their next first baseman. Who's it going to be? We'll obviously keep track of that as the weeks go on, as we get closer to spring training in the MLB. But another story out of the MLB is that the San Diego Padres seem to have dropped out of the Roki Sasaki sweepstakes. I talked about it a couple days ago. It looked like he was going to end up on one of the Dodgers, the Padres, or the Blue Jays, who were the third team involved. San Diego now drops out. I just don't see a world where he ends up in Toronto. I think this is just all the plan of the Dodgers continuing to roll and continuing to get the top guys. Roki Sasaki, all of the noise that came out earlier in this sweepstakes was that he's going to end up on the West Coast. He's going to end up with one of the Padres or the Dodgers. Yes, the Blue Jays get involved, and they're looking for more international bonus pool money, excuse me. But right now, it seems like the Dodgers are just the go-to team, and everybody wants to play for the Dodgers. That's just the story right now, and it's good to be the best team in baseball if you're the LA Dodgers, because they just continue to get guy after guy, and I mean, they're going to be a wagon of a team for the foreseeable future as they just continue to get guy after guy, and Roki Sasaki could be the next guy on that list. So we'll see what happens, but obviously big news that the Padres have most likely dropped out. Still not finalized yet, but reports say that they're really going to be out on Roki Sasaki, and it's going to come down to the Dodgers or the Blue Jays. Who's going to get the Japanese right-hander? We'll follow that as the weeks go on. Two sets of previews here. We got college basketball and the NFL. Let's start things off in college basketball and just preview some of these games. A great Saturday slate for college basketball. And let's start off with the big one in my mind, the biggest one. It's number 4 Alabama traveling to Rupp Arena to take on number 8 Kentucky. Both teams 14-3 on the season. Alabama coming off the loss during the week to Ole Miss, where they were upset in Tuscaloosa and held to a really low point total, 64 points. That's it that Alabama was able to score against Ole Miss, and a team that really has so much firepower on offense and such a high tempo offense type of team. I think when you look at that, that's just so disappointing for Nate Oates' squad, and they really need to bounce back, but it's not going to be easy going to Rupp Arena, one of the toughest places to play in all of the nation. And Kentucky at home, it just feels like a different feeling when the Wildcats really get in front of that home crowd and that place just erupts. I mean, they already have some upsets so far this season. They took down Florida a couple weeks ago, and then you look at even just games during the week. They take down A&M. They went on the road. They defeated Mississippi State. But at home, they just have a different feel to them. And I think Kentucky, it's going to be hard for Alabama and the Crimson Tide to really distract Kentucky there on their home floor and really get to Kentucky at Rupp Arena. It's impossible to do in my mind. And I think Kentucky will probably grab the win there. Another SEC game, but a big one on the road for the number 1 team in the country. 16-1, number 1 Auburn travels to Athens to take on number 23 Georgia. Georgia finally ranked this week after some big wins and obviously some upset wins. They took down Kentucky a couple weeks ago, who I mentioned just a moment ago. 14-3 on the year Georgia is, and they just continue to roll, and this is a tough place to play down in Athens, and that's not going to be an easy game for Auburn. They've been pretty bulletproof when it comes to those big games and on the road. Yes, they lost their one game in Cameron indoor on the road against Duke, but I think this one is meant for Auburn and those guys. They really are a strong team, and they really play well together. And Bruce Pearl's got these guys ready to go, and I feel like it's going to be a straightforward game, just business as usual for Auburn. I know Georgia's a tough place to play. Could we see an upset? Maybe, but I'd pick Auburn over any team in the country right now. They are just that good, and even with the injury to Johni Broome, I feel like Auburn still has the advantage, and they maybe Johni Broome will be back. We'll see what happens, and all the noise coming in out of Auburn, but I feel like Auburn just pretty straightforward. Like I said, business as usual, and they are the top team in the country for a reason. So can they break out of that spell and maybe get upset here by Georgia? I don't see it happening. We'll see what happens, though, 1 o'clock on Saturday. And finally, last couple of games here is Texas takes on Florida. That one down in Gainesville, Florida, looking to bounce back after that upset loss to Missouri in Gainesville earlier this week. And obviously the rest of the games, there's a ranked game between number 21 Ole Miss and number 15 Mississippi State, 6 o'clock on Saturday. And that game's going to be a good one as Ole Miss coming off the upset on the road of Alabama. Can they do it twice? But Starkville is not an easy place to play. And Mississippi State, coming off a couple losses, really brought back down to earth. They need to bounce back and grab a huge win here against Ole Miss, their rival. And the Battle of Mississippi, that's going to be a great one tomorrow. So make sure you tune into that one, 6 o'clock on Saturday night. Let's finish things off today with an NFL Divisional playoff preview. There are 4 games, and each one of these games seems like it could go one way or another. I would say 3 of those games, really, I would pick the favorite to control things. Let's start off with the first one. It's Saturday, 4:30. Tomorrow, it's going to be the Texans, the 4th seed in the AFC, taking on the 1 seed, Kansas City Chiefs at Arrowhead Stadium. And the Chiefs come in 8-point favorites, 41.5 is the total. I mean, this is business as usual for Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs. They should handle business here. I don't think the Texans can upset them at Arrowhead, especially with how the Chiefs have been playing this year. Yes, it's been close games, but I mean, how can you pick against the Kansas City Chiefs at Arrowhead right now against the Texans team that has 7 losses on the year versus the Chiefs who have only lost a couple games this season? I think the Chiefs overall, they've really only lost 1 game. That second game was against the Broncos in Week 18. So you can't even really count that. I feel like the Chiefs are just the best team in the NFL, and they've proved that so far this season. I don't think the Texans are able to get close to them, and I think the Chiefs really handled this one perfectly at Arrowhead Stadium, but we'll see what happens. 8 o'clock, it's going to be the 6-seeded Washington Commanders traveling to Ford Field in Detroit to take on the 1-seeded Detroit Lions in the NFC. Lions come in as 9.5-point favorites, and rightfully so. That team is an absolute wagon out of the NFC, and who's going to stop them? I mean, it's going to be pretty close. We'll see what happens with the winner of the other game, but there's no chance that the Lions lose this one, and I'm saying that confidently. There is no chance that the Lions lose this game. They are fighting for a Super Bowl here. They're getting some guys back. David Montgomery looking to come back for this playoff run. But the Lions at 9.5-point favorites, it's that high for a reason. And I think the Lions should handle business. Jaden Daniels had a good run, and this Washington team had a good run. But I think they're just running into the top team, or one of the top teams in the NFL, and definitely the top team in the NFC so far this season. So Detroit will handle business here and take down Washington in my mind. Off to Sunday's games, and these are some great games that we have in the NFC and the AFC. 3 o'clock, we'll start off in the NFC as the number 4-seeded Los Angeles Rams travel to the Link to take on the 2-seeded Philadelphia Eagles on Sunday at 3 o'clock, and the Eagles are 6.5-point favorites in this one. I do expect the Eagles to win this game. I don't expect them to cover. 6.5, a lot of points. The Rams, talk about a team that nobody wants to face right now. They're fighting for something bigger. Obviously, all the things happening in Los Angeles, and we're praying for all those people, and really that's part of their community, and they're fighting for something a lot bigger than just a playoff win here. They're fighting for the city of Los Angeles, and I think that's going to be enough motivation for them to really keep it a tight game against Philadelphia. I do think the Eagles will win the game in the end, like I said, but this one's going to be down to the wire, very, very close, and I think the Rams definitely cover in this one, but the Eagles find a way to win and move on to the NFC Championship game. But that's not an easy game for Philadelphia, even though they're at home, and even though the certain situation right now, I feel like the Rams are just a tough team to play against, and they're going to keep it close against Philadelphia on Sunday. Finally, the last game, 6:30 start. It's the 3-seeded Baltimore Ravens taking on the 2-seeded Buffalo Bills in Orchard Park, the game that we've been waiting for, and the game of the weekend most likely. as Lamar Jackson versus Josh Allen. All the storylines. It's going to be 18 degrees up in Buffalo. Can the Ravens handle that? They'll probably say, yeah, no problem. The Ravens are 1-point favorites on the road, taking on the Buffalo Bills. This Ravens team blew out Buffalo earlier in the year. Derrick Henry had himself a field day against this Buffalo Bills defense. Will it be the same story this time, though, in Orchard Park? The Ravens have dropped little games here and there, but still are finding their mojo, and I really feel like they've found their mojo in the last couple of games and are really starting to roll. And I feel like Derrick Henry and Lamar Jackson could give this Buffalo defense a lot of fits, even on their home field up in Orchard Park. As for the Bills, though, they're getting some guys back. Their defense looking a bit better in recent weeks, but I think this one is all about their offense, how high-powered their offense is and how well they're going to play. I mean, they absolutely crunched the Broncos in the last round and in the wild card round, and really proves that their offense is almost at its peak for this season right now. But they're going up against a Ravens defense that's been up and down this year. Can the Bills take advantage of that? It's a hard pick here, but I'm going to take the home team. I will take the Buffalo Bills on their home field. They're in Orchard Park. I know the danger that Lamar Jackson as well as Derrick Henry can cause for Buffalo in this game, but I mean, how can I pick against Josh Allen at home? I think that's just so difficult to do. They've been really strong in his postseason career so far, and I really think when you look at Buffalo, they take down teams like the Baltimore Ravens who come into Orchard Park. So we'll see what happens, but obviously that one is going to be a huge game. 6:30 start on Sunday night, as it's the 12-5 Baltimore Ravens, the 3 seed in the AFC, taking on the 13-4 Buffalo Bills, the 2 seed in the AFC. What a nightcap that one is going to be. Make sure you tune into all of those games and enjoy divisional playoff weekend in the NFL. But that'll do it for episode 41 of the MudWatch Sports Podcast. Please subscribe below. I've been Zach Malamuth. Thanks for watching, and talk to you all on Monday.